today, the First Lady, and she's expressed a desire to sing our song. So, here's how we do it. I hope Gary hasn't forgotten the tune. I hope you haven't forgotten the words. I hope I haven't forgotten the words. And I hope you haven't forgotten the words. One, two, three. Take me out to the ball. Me out to the buy me some.
The Monday Morning Quarterback on the 28th of October 2018, beaming to you from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. Congratulations to the Boston Red Sox, the champions of the 2018 World Series. The final game, Game 5, was in Los Angeles last night. And, of course, the Red Sox came out on top with 4 games to 1 there. And that was the end of that. From the LA Times here, the bells are tolled for the for the 2018 Dodgers season at 8:17. That would be Pacific Coast time on Sunday, as Manny Machado, who used to be with Baltimore, made the final fruitful swing of the season in Game 5 of the World Series, a 5-1 deficit defeated to the Boston Red Sox that lacked the drama and turmoil of the previous night. The anticlimactic still stung. Despite looking feeble for majority of the Fall Classic, the team finished 3 victories shy of the championship, which has eluded the Los Angeles since 1988. The drought reached its 30th year in disparaging fashion. The Dodgers spent a summer with these flaws hiding in plain sight. The group overcame them to collect their second consecutive National League pennant. Then, across 54 innings with the Red Sox, the team saw itself torn apart from within and from without. They made mistakes and paid for them. They failed to execute and saw their opponents romped inside their own ballpark, which teamed with the Red Sox fans by Sunday's conclusion. The evening felt like, in eerie comparison to Game 7 last year. Of course, last year the Houston Astros were the ones. The opponents launched a first inning salvo. The offense squandered early opportunities. The crowd sat on its hands, desperate for materials to cheer about. No raising of waving of blue flags. The Dodgers offered little. They were unable to send the series back to Boston, which they would have lost anyway, in my opinion. The defeat ushered in a winter of uncertainty. Manager Dave Roberts does not have a guaranteed contract for 2019. He exposed himself to criticism after a questionable decision in the series, including over-reliance on the fading reliever Ryan Matson, and Clayton Kershaw can depart in free agency. He took 2 losses in 5 games. Kershaw surrendered 3 home runs across 7 innings. He was charged with 4 runs. The ballpark hushed after serving up a first inning blast. The atmosphere muted. From there, called into relief in the 8th. Pedro Baez yielded a homer of his own. Facing the Boston starter, David Price, a veteran with more checkered playoff history than Kershaw, the Dodgers capitulated. Price cruised into the 8th inning. The crowd offered a standing ovation when he departed after a leadoff walk. The night before, the Red Sox roared to life when Roberts removed the starting pitcher Rich Hill. The Dodgers whimpered again against reliever Joe Kelly. Joe Kelly wiped out Matt Kemp and Jock Peterson, Cody Bellinger to squander their last threats of the evening. Overmatched during the first 2 games at Fenway Park, the Dodgers slowed Boston's momentum in 18 inning marathon of Game 3. But the team could not recover from the ballpark implosion in Game 4. The bitterness from Saturday night has not faded. When the Game 5 began, reporters picked apart the mid-game conversation between Hill and Roberts. Hill insisted, "I never wanted to come out of the game," while confirming he did tell Roberts to keep an eye on him during the Saturday's pivotal 7th inning. Roberts noted that when he left his dugout with 1 out and a runner at first base, "I didn't waver in a pitcher. I went up to the mound and was given the ball." Roberts handed the ball to his reliever, who spent the next 3 innings shredding a 4-run lead and pushing the Dodgers to the brink. The manager bore the weight. The fans booed Roberts during the pregame introduction on Sunday night. A sizable portion of the crowd wore Red Sox gear. A pale darkened on the rest as Kershaw took the mound. Sunday marked Kershaw's 340th start. As a Dodger, it might be his last. He can opt into free agency this offseason. He has not revealed his intentions. He insisted on Saturday he did not worry about his legacy. His post-game resume is solidly littered with failure, but those loom large in the public's consciousness. Game 5 started in a deflating fashion. Kershaw gave up 1 out single to Andrew Benintelli. Up came first baseman Steve Pearce, who had taken Kenley Jansen deep in the game, and this is one of the problems there on Saturday night, and swatted a run double an inning later off of Kenta Maeda to burst Game 4 open. Pierce crushed a thigh-high slider for a 2-run shot. One swing from David Freese, having the deficit in the bottom of the inning. Roberts built a lineup with Freese in the leadoff spot, guaranteeing him at least 1 at-bat against Price, a left-handed pitcher. Freese made the most of his initial opportunity. He redirected a first-pitch fastball from Price over the left fence. Let me finish this up here. Kershaw stumbled in the 6th. He was punished by the Red Sox outfielder Mookie Betts. Mookie Betts has punished a lot of pitchers. The Dodgers had muffled Betts, the likely American League MVP earlier in the series. He came to the plate hitting a 190, whip a double at only extra base hit. That changed when Kershaw left a slider over the middle, always does. Kershaw hunched at the waist on the mound as Betts launched the ball over the left field fence. Another homer took flight in the seventh. Martinez denoted a 90-mile fastball into left center field. Enrique Hernandez scraped off the wall trying to retrieve it, and the ball eluded his grasp. The Red Sox had expanded their lead to 3 to grow to 4 in the 8th, but no more was needed. The Dodgers never answered. Well, this is from the LA Times. This is Andy McCullough. Anyway, this is the story from Los Angeles. And from the Washington Post, well, this is actually their own. The Red Sox close out the Dodgers in 5 with to win Fort World Series title since 2004. Incidentally, the hero of the 2004 World Series was none other than Dave Roberts. Period. The Red Sox opened their spring training on Valentine's Day and notched the season's first win on Good Friday. And by Mother's Day, they were playing at a 700 clip. By Independence Day, when they shut out the Washington Nationals, they had first place lead that they would not relinquish again, and by Labor Day they were 51 games above 500. And on the final day of the regular season, they notched their 108th win, and on the former holiday known as Columbus Day, they crushed the Yankees by 15 runs in the playoffs. Opening round is now known as by a different name. Nonetheless, on Sunday night at Dodger Stadium, 2,600 miles from home and 3 days shy of Halloween, it was no joke to the Dodgers. The Red Sox put the finishing touches on one of the greatest seasons in baseball history, a 5-1 victory over the Dodgers in Game 5. This World Series, and we'll have a special program on it, will come to be known as the longest World Series, 18.5 innings ever, long series World Series game. 54,367 stood. That was while Mr. Price was pitching, and of course Manny Machado closed out the game. The Red Sox roster full of 9-figure contracts, MVP candidates, former Cy Young winners, etc. So in other words, had it lined up there. The Dodgers tried to compensate. They got Manny Machado and several other players, but did not have enough. They went 7-0 in games that started by southpaws, including victory over Cy Young winners, Kershaw, Dallas Kershaw, and C.C. Sabathia, the New York pitcher. And as they say, so it goes. This is Dave Schilling, I suppose. Schilling. Anyway, there's one good team playing in these 5 games, and there was one great team. The former headed into another winter, wondering what it will take to win it. The latter will be parading down Boston Street sometime around Halloween. And so it goes. Ending might last through Christmas. It could happen that way, a cathartic situation there. Nonetheless, that is the Boston Red Sox, and we were looking at several different situations. I'll go to our regular lineup now and see where we are here. We have some polling. Let me kind of cement this together with an article by E.J. Dion. Incidentally, in Brazil, the right-wing candidate there won the election. We will cover that on BR on the World. We'll talk about the election in Brazil and the emergence of this fascist candidate in Brazil. And I was looking to see if he was still making headlines. Well, it's one of the things happens. The headlines fall and they don't. Go to the BBC here. Yes. Bolsonaro, he is the new president of Brazil. And on BR on the World, we'll have the statistics situation. This is another right-wing populist. Bolsonaro's won by 55.2% to 54.98% for Orlando Haddad. He was of the Workers' Party. And it's an interesting election. Had Mr. Lula been able to run and not disqualified, he would have won this election. Period. The country had been led by a conservative, Michael Turnin, following the impeachment of, and remember, Diana Rousseff. But he'd become very unpopular, so she is gone, Lula is gone. And this character, Bolsonaro, retired army officer, member of the Social Liberal Party, an anti-establishment group that combined social conservatism with pro-market. If you remember, Schickengruber in Germany was also pro-market, so that doesn't say very much there at all. And the valid votes, were roughly 4,989,349. The blank of abstentions were 2,493,109. That would have been 2.15%. And invalid votes, as they call them here, that was 8,614,546. So it tells you a little about the Brazilian election. We will have more on it, and also more on these so-called populist or fascistic candidates that appear on the scene. Let me get to E.J. Dion's piece here. The Trump grip on power depends on splitting the nation in two. That's not unusual. That's a classic political consultant's stratagem. Many times you have to split things up or become a conflict theorist. It's often innocently assumed that presidents, this is by E.J. Dion Jr. on the 20th of October, by virtue of their office they hold, automatically push aside a partisanship in face of a national crisis. The slaughter of at the Three Trees of Life congregation in Pittsburgh, combined with the pipe bomber sent to opponents of D.J. Trump, is certainly such a moment. But wishful thinking overlooks the central fact about Trump's approach to politics. His grip on power depends entirely on splitting the nation into two angry divisions, rooted in race, gender, immigration status, religion, and ideology. What I would say here, the ideology is number one, and it covers all of the aforementioned. Allows Trump to become president. Absence of politics of versus them. Trumpism makes no sense at all. That explains why Trump sometimes often offers presidentially appropriate words. It will require all of us to work together to the extent the hateful poison of the hateful poison of anti-Semitism. He said at a rally that was on Saturday night in Illinois. but almost immediately returned to baiting and assaulting his enemies, and also groups against whom he hopes to court a backlash. The New York Times headline, it was accurate. It could have been ran at so many times during his presidency. Trump makes call for unity at rally, then resumes old tactics. So really it was not a call for any unity at all. On a Sunday afternoon, Trump took to Twitter to ridicule a Democratic donor, Tom Steyer, as a crazy, stumbling lunatic. Never mind, Steyer was targeted by one of more than a dozen pipe bombs sent to critics of DJ Trump. The Twitter came roughly 48 hours after Cesar Seo, a Florida man whose van was plastered with pictures of DJ Trump. But none of this should have been a surprising taken. Trump took the threats against his foes so highly that on Friday he tweeted his complaint that the bomb stuff, yes, really used that phrase, had slowed the Republican momentum, and no doubt about it. The legitimization of hate groups in the interest of electoral success is a goal of Trump. Hyping of an immigrant caravan, and this is one of the concerns of the murder in Pittsburgh from Central America, dirtifully giving extensive coverage by the very same media Trump regularly assaults. Administrations threatened to close the southern borders. A White House official unapologetically put a partisan spin on what is supposed to be a serious policy, describing DJ Trump's border move as a way to address the Democratic-created crisis of mass illegal immigration. The failed Republican leaders to denounce a president who is devoting himself to ripping apart reflects a ground-level truth about republicanism in 2018. I would say beyond or before or prior to 2018, the same thing. The party of Lincoln and Eisenhower has been consumed temporarily, one divorced wishes by a narrow and exclusionary form of identity politics. The importance of the backlash around race and immigration inside the Republican Party is a central theme of a time careful and data-rich new book by a political scientist named John Slides, Michael Tesler, and Lynn Varick. It's called Identity Crisis. They argue that Trump understood what was happening within the party in a way his rivals did not. He ignored many Republicans who criticized him. And this is the whole thing about these various factions. They ignore whatever facts that are brought out to them. For emboldening fringe so-called white or European nationalists, and then became the champion of European voters with racially infected grievances. They write, Trump tapped into beliefs, ideas, and anxieties that were already present and ever well established within the party. His support was hiding in plain sight, no doubt about this. As a result, Republican politicians now have an incentive to run on issues connected to identity as opposed to traditional platforms of limited government. They have pretty much abandoned a limited government. They've also abandoned budget balancing period or the deficit. The office what turns out to be a dead-on description of the campaign we are watching. Trump's positions on immigration, Confederate monuments, the national anthem protests, that's by Mr. Colin Kaepernick, have proven more popular with Republican voters than the GOP tax bill. There's no doubt about that. The Republicans alternative to the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. Nobody really knows what that one is. The truth of that sentence is brought home in the the systematic lying by Republicans candidates about what their goal of repealing Obamacare would mean in practice. Normally calling to end polarization, speaking of the need to bring two parties together to find compromise, but their benign bromits are useless. When one party thrives on the aggressive mistrust and fear. This is not blaming Trump for the pipe bomb and the synagogue killings. Responsibility falls on those who undertook those evil acts. Well, people in a society do not act in a vacuum. When you have this type of fascist rhetoric going on out there, where you talk about journalists, talk about attacking journalists, where you talk about fake news, the lying press, etc., the dirty press. That's the same tactic in Nazi Germany. One has to look at these attacks have not started during the presidency of Barack Obama. Various people, followers of Hillary the Monster Clinton, in particular, were able to write all kinds of disparaging things about President Obama. And President Obama's, particularly one of the things, Obamacare, the birth certificate crisis, they were able to put this false flag out there. The birther movement, DJ Trump was one of the big operators behind that. But this whole situation out here, and then you have, of course, the social issues, a woman's right to choose, abortion rights, etc., the right to buy a cake for your wedding, those kinds of social issues that appeal to evangelicals. And not only that, you have evangelicals that have fallen in with the Zionists. The Zionists wanted Jerusalem as their mythical capital. And one has to understand, and this is a part of the problem, particularly when you bring in religions into an argument. You no longer have a dialectic discussion. You can no longer look to the history of a particular region, and any moron knows that the British were in that area. They were the ones that governed this area called Palestine. There's no such thing as a people that call themselves Palestinian. They are Palestinians. And what has happened here is these people can no longer bring out these bankrupt side issues anymore. So they blamed President Barack Obama for his Mideast policy, and then fell in with this new policy with the ultra-right evangelicals, whom have turned their movement into similar to what operated in Lebanon behind their so-called Christian movement called the Phalange. That was a fascist movement. So in other words, that is all you get out of it. You can't move from Brooklyn and move to Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, become a settler there, and take the same crass racism that you have in the American nation to the Mideast. And that is what has long been happening. Now you have situations like this character in Pittsburgh that is obviously a fascist. But I have seen posts on Facebook where they say, well, various people have enabled this atmosphere that had their so-called anti-Semitism. Well, the problem is you have fascists in the form of Miller in the White House. And to pinpoint other people there, including the minister from Chicago, we have to bring it all out, Louis Farrakhan. Louis has been saying what he has been saying for over 30 years. Period. He's not the president of the United States. Period. So thus, whatever his opinions are his opinions, and so forth. But they brought up the thing, well, why we would not denounce Louis Farrakhan. Denouncing Louis Farrakhan is a waste of time. It's sort of like these other movements. People that follow him, as people that follow DJ Trump, they are not going to be persuaded. And this is what DJ is talking about here. They have cemented in whatever opinions that they have. Period. They do not address factual situations. Recall when the leader of the Labour Party in the UK lectured people on what the situation was in Palestine, and the former late British Prime Minister Balfour. There was an agreement there called the Balfour Agreement. That was what divided up what is now the Mideast and established the Zionist state. And that is not based on any religion. That's based on politics and neocolonialism. And any fool knows that has long been the situation there. It affects various countries in the Mideast and also various emerging African countries, that their borders were set up by the former colonial masters, period. And they've caused all kinds of problems to this day. An example of that would be Kuwait, that used to be part of Iraq, period. They fought a war over it. Saddam was correct about it. And this is part of the problem also. With social media now, there's much more information out there. All you need to go to the history books, not what we're telling you here. Go to the history books, look up the Balfour Agreement, and you will find out what it was about. You will also find out what parts of that particular area that the British had under their administration. It's very simple to find that out. We can't get into these very mystical things of who has a capital, who was chosen by whom. All these religious types who claim that they were chosen by whatever, including The Rock. So in other words, you get into this, you're not dealing with a rational discussion. Period. If you're dealing with a dialectical situation, you're dealing with the two basic prone approaches. Either you're dealing with a materialist approach, which we deal with, or you're dealing with idealism. Idealism includes religions and mystical types, swamis, voodoo, you name it. All these characters come in here, and that can also be slanted towards an individualistic approach. It depends. But there are other things coming, and what's happening in the American nation is more and more these side issues are coming to light. Period. And they are being addressed. We even noticed that in West Virginia they are lowering the flags at half-mast because of Pittsburgh. Of course, when we had the Holocaust at the church in South Carolina, they did not lower the flags at half-mast. But those issues are issues that will come about. It's sort of like what's happening in Florida with Mr. Gillum running there and being called by his opponent a monkey. Well, those are the kinds of things that you'll see out here. Does it get any better? No. It continues on. The problem is that some of these groups that follow the right wing are heavily armed. And evidently the man in Pittsburgh was not only armed, but he understood tactics. He fought it out with the SWAT team, and he's still alive. Period. And some of those coppers are now in the intense care. I haven't seen if any of them have died recently, but that is the point. And this whole situation here, when you up the rhetoric, and that is what's happened to get some votes, and then you'll have opportunists like West and company that come in and hope to turn it, as they say, into gold. And this is what we look at more and more. So when you start, as E.J. Dionne, very smart here, political science and scientists have looked at it, It's the same thing happened in Brazil with Barceros. Barceros used WhatsApp to get out fake messages to people, and also intimidation, and at the same time violence. And that's what you're seeing in this country: intimidation, violence, and social coercion, and various other things. So in other words, this whole paradigm is changing. And now we have not only the so-called pipe bombs being mailed out, they've said it's fake news. In fact, DJ Trump is reported, we don't know, but to have told someone in a telephone conversation, private obviously, that this whole situation is causing him problems, and that it could be brought on by certain groups to whip up this new climate, as the same thing they said about the Me Too movement and Dr. Ford in her testimony, but it was whipped up by the Democrats. It was their creation. The immigration thing is their creation. So you have this out there, and you're not going to dissuade any of these people in a debate or any kind of rational argument, because they have decided. But now that, as they say, the heater has been brought in, the thing has heated up. These characters are not only on these right-wing platforms writing various things, but they have been acting. It's sort of like the guy, where was he, in Kentucky, that was going into an African church, and they didn't let him in, so he couldn't kill any people there. So he went to a Kroger's and shot 2 African-American males. And then when he surrendered, he said, well, Europeans don't shoot each other. So, I mean, this is the unfortunate time that we live in. But to blame the Russians, or even to blame DJ Trump, is not the situation. DJ Trump did not create these objective conditions that we now live under. Let me do the sports here. Enough. Well, we'll look at some polling here. EJ did a very good job there of tying together our themes on right-wing populism. We just have one poll out here. Knight, he's in California, 29, is ahead by 4 points. This is on Monday polling. Out of Indiana, this is all CBS polling here. Brahm is ahead by 3 points over Senator Donnelly. In Arizona, what is his name? McSally and Sinema. Sinema's ahead by 3 points according to this one. And in Florida, Scott and Nelson are tied up. In Arizona, Ducey's a governor, up by 11 points. Gillum up by 1 point. That is in Florida. That's CBS News YouGov. And the New York Times poll, another one, DeSantos and Gillum. They have Gillum up by 5 points. And in Iowa 3, that is Young and what is it? Annie? Nancy? Wait a minute here. Yeah. Anyway, Annie. Anyways, up by 2. That is in Iowa. And in New York, District 11, Donovan is up by 4 over Rose. And in New York, 24, Calco is up by 14, the Republican there. So that is that part of it. So now let's do the sports. That score, and we gave that before. Nonetheless, the victorious Boston Red Sox, 5-1 over the Los Angeles Dodgers. Let's get the basketball scores in here. The Warriors and Nets in Jersey. Warriors 120-114. The Jazz and Mavericks in Dallas. Jazz 113-104. The Suns and Thunder in OKC was the Thunder 117-110. And finally, the Wizards and Clippers in Los Angeles. Clippers 136-104. And to college football, yes, we still have college football going on. This is the top 25. Baylor versus West Virginia. West Virginia 58-14. Appalachian State and Georgia Southern with Georgia Southern 34-14. Utah and UCLA. Utah number 23, 41-10. Clemson, which is number 2, in Florida State. Clemson 59-10. Notre Dame and Navy. Notre Dame 44-22. Texas and Oklahoma State. High scoring game there. Oklahoma State 38-35. Florida and Georgia. Georgia 36-17. Kansas State and Oklahoma. It was all Oklahoma here. They're number 8, 51-14. Kentucky and Missouri. 1 point game there. Kentucky 15-14. Washington State and Stanford. High scoring game here. Washington State 41-38 over Stanford. And the University of Washington and California. University of California, I assume. 12-10. And then we have Texas A&M and Mississippi State. It was Mississippi State 28-13. Iowa and Penn State. Penn State's number 12. Iowa is number 18 in this top 25 operation. Penn State 30-24. The Oregon Ducks and Arizona. It was all Arizona 44-15. Wisconsin in Northwestern out of Chicago. 31-17 Northwestern. In South Florida and University of Houston. Houston 57-36. In North Carolina State and Syracuse, a high-scoring game here. Syracuse 51-41, and I don't think Syracuse is not ranked, and we could look at some others here, but unfortunately they are by division, so we're not going to spend the time to do that. That is basically where we are. We will return on WBRN and have BR on the World, and we'll cover the election in Brazil. We have a special program by Telsor. They interviewed various analysts on the Brazilian situation, and political scientists, etc., where the left is going in Brazil after the election of Bolsonaro, and his particular situation there, and what it means for Brazil. Brazil, incidentally, was on a military dictatorship. This guy has talked in those terms, and we'll put our own take on it as we move along. We also have an open source report coming up here very soon. Let me get my headset back on. Very soon, and we have some more debates to cover, and we will get those debates out. This will be a busy week. We're on the 29th, so we have the whole week here. Next Tuesday will be Election Day. The 1st of November is on a Thursday, so in Halloween there's no trick or treat here on the 31st coming up here. So wish everyone a happy Halloween. Anyway, old Boston Red from the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth. Have a good week, everyone. We'll talk to you soon. That you can.